Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good day everyone and happy fasting. So today I will explain about second language acquisition, chapter 1 until chapter 5. Before that, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Vira Juniar. I from PBI 4, the Honorable, my lecturer, Miss Mutmainah M.Pd as our lecturer in second language acquisition. Chapter 1, Key Issues in Second Language Acquisition. Second Language Acquisition or L2 adalah proses di mana orang belajar dan memahami bahasa kedua selain bahasa ibu mereka atau bahasa pertama. According to Ellis 1989, the second language issues are situational factors, linguistic input, learner differences, learner processes, and linguistic output. Okay, next. SLA as uniform phenomenon. As a second language acquisition is product of many factors pertaining to the learner and other learning situation. SLA versus first language acquisition. Second language acquisition stands contrast to first language acquisition. It is study how the learners learn additional language after they have their mother tongue. The third, SLA versus foreign language acquisition. SLA is not intended to contrast with foreign language acquisition. And the last, the centrality of syntax and morphology. SLA refers to all the aspects of language thought language learner needs to master. Focus on how L2 learners acquire grammatical system such as negative or interrogative or grammatical morphemes such as plural or subject or definite and indefinite article. Next, competence and versus performance. Competence is representasi mental dari aturan linguistik yang membentuk tata bahasa yang terinternalisasi dari pembicara. Sedangkan performance is pemahaman dan produksi bahasa. Based on Chomsky's statement in 1965, a distinction is often made between competence and performance. Acquisition versus learning. Acquisition is the way kita belajar bahasa pertama kita. Cara lain kita belajar bahasa pertama. Sedangkan learning adalah belajar tentang bahasa kedua. Based on Ellis' statement in 1985, acquisition and learning are not a real distinction. Next, the role of the first language. The second language learner were imposed by her or his first language. The differences between first language and second language. And the third is similarities between first language and second language. And the fourth, language transfer. And the last is constructive analysis. Individual learner differences there are 5 individual learner differences is age, the second is aptitude, and the third is cognitive style, next is motivation, and the last is personality. Learner processes could be divided into which are cognitive and linguistic strategies. And the next is the role of formal instruction, the effect that instruction has on the root of learning and the effect that it has on rate of learning. Okay, next. Chapter 2. The role of first language acquisition is strongly influenced by the learner first language or L1. Behavior is learning theory, habits and errors. Habit, two important characteristics of habit. The first is observable and the second is automatic. The learning of habit that could be occur through is imitation and reinforcement. And the error were undesirable. The predict areas of potential error is the first is classroom practice and having examined. Next, contrastive analysis have two aspects, psychological aspect and linguistic aspect. The first is contrastive study structure characteristics. There are description, selection, comparison, and prediction. And the second one is criticism of the contrastive analysis hypothesis. The first is concerning ability to predict error, and the second one is number of theoretical feasibility of comparing language, and the last is reservation contrastive analysis, and the last is theoretical criticism. There are the attack on behaviorist language learning, and the second one is the nature of relationship between the notion predictive contrastive analysis. And next is practical criticism. Sebagian besar kesalahan pelajar tidak disebabkan oleh gangguan, maka analisis konstruktif memiliki nilai terbatas. And the next is reversal took the form, the natural language transfer, and the contribution made by the first language or L1. Language transfer mean recognize that difficulty predicted by constructive analysis and recognize that error multifactor phenomenon. Avoidance inducted by the first language was first provided in now famous study, and the degree of similarity, the structures of the two languages were different, and a multi-factor approach, naturalness factor, and inference can account for what is second language acquisition. Contrastive pragmatics, fairly recent development, although argued by it has origin in a lot. Chapter 3: Interlanguage and the Natural Route of Development. Mentalist theory. Language is a human-specific faculty. Interlanguage. There are 5 principal processes in interlanguage. The first is language transfer. The second, overgeneralization of target language rules. And the third is transfer of training. And next, strategies of second language learning, and the last is strategies of second language communication. And next, prevention and identification errors. The prevention of errors was more important than identification. And next is longitudinal study. Describe the gradual growth of competence in relation to the strategies used by a learner. Interrogation. The development of interrogation rules was gradual, involving overlapping stage and substitution of slow transitional form. Next, interpreting the empirical evidence. There are differences which can be attributed to factors such as the first language or L1. Also, there can be broad differences in the approach that learners adopt. And summary, longitudinal research has provided strong evidence in favor of a natural developmental route in second language acquisition. There is evidence to show considerable similarity in the way that negation and interrogatives develop in learners with different first language or L1, including those that belong to different types of language. There is also evidence to suggest that advanced grammatical structure, such as relative clause, may also follow universal course. And the next is Chapter 4. Chapter 4, Variability in Interlanguage. Variabilitas mengacu pada kasus di mana bahasa kedua pelajar menggunakan 2 atau lebih varian linguistik untuk mengekspresikan sebuah fenomena yang hanya memiliki satu realisasi dalam target bahasa. Types of variability is there are systematic variability and non-systematic variability. Systematic variability, according to Alice 1992, systematic variability can result from linguistic context, situational context, and physiological context. And non-systematic variability. Interlanguage is also characterized by non-systematic variability, which is of 2 types. And the first is performance variability, and the second one is free variability. Systematic variability, situational variability. Ketika seorang pelajar diminta untuk menjawab pertanyaan guru di kelas, dia akan membuat kesalahan yang tidak akan pernah dia lakukan tes tata bahasa karena dia dalam situasi mendesak dan tidak punya waktu untuk memanfaatkan dan mendahului dan ikut struktur variabel yang dimaksud. Linguistic variability. Mendahului dan ikut struktur variabel yang dimaksud. Physical linguistic variability. Mengacu pada sejauh mana jenis penggunaan bahasa memberi waktu untuk perencanaan dan mendorong atau mencegah pemantauan. Non-systematic variability. Performance variability. Variabilitas adalah hasil dari beberapa kegagalan kinerja termasuk kesalahan lidah, kesalahan mulai derivasi dari aturan, perubahan pikiran, dan sebagainya. Free variability mengacu pada fenomena peserta didik memiliki dua atau lebih bentuk yang dia gunakan untuk mewujudkan arti yang sama. Next, Chapter 5. Individual Learner Differences and Second Language Acquisition. Aspect Second Language Acquisition. Identification and classification of learners' factors. Identification and classification of learner factors. Identifying the individual differences and classifying them are a complex task because the differences or the characteristics are abstract phenomena. The main difficulty is that it is not visible to identify, observe, assess, and identify directly such qualities as aptitude, motivation, or anxiety. Next, personal factors. Personal factors, group dynamics. Group dynamics seems to be important in classroom second language acquisition based on Bailey's statement in 1983. Attitude to the teacher and course materials. Some prefer a teacher who, in Stavic's 1980 terms, creates space for them to pursue their own learning path. Individual learning techniques. Nyman 1978, State and Fickett 1978 identify numerous study techniques. Here is a sample of those that learners reported they used to develop their vocabulary in second language. The first is preparing and memorizing, and the second learning words in context, and the last is practicing vocabulary. General factors. There are 5 general factors in second language acquisition. Age. Age is the variable that has been most frequently considered in discussion of individual differences in second language acquisition. The second, aptitude. Aptitude is not easy to define. It is usually defined in terms of the tests that have been used to measure its Carroll and Sapon's modern language aptitude test in 1995. Motivation. Motivation is key factor for explaining the success or failure of any difficult activity. Researchers agree that motivation is an important part of mastering a second or foreign language. Next, cognitive style. Cognitive style is a term used to refer to the manner in which people perceive, conceptualize, organize, and recall information. And the last is personality. Personality, based on Cattell in 1970, for instance, attempts to measure personality using a series of dichotomies seen as poles on continuum, such as cool or warm, shy or venturesome, not assertive or dominant. Okay, I think that's all from me. And I say wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a nice day and happy fasting, guys.